Good morning, good evening, good night, whatever time it is for you. For me, it is 2:04 in the morning. I am working an overnight shift, and I'm going to go work my normal morning and afternoon thing, trying to accomplish some goals in life. But I wanted to take a moment and talk about something that I think is really important and something I've been trying to better in myself. And I hope it doesn't come across that me making these videos is some sort of flex or embellishment of my own qualities. What I'm trying to accomplish with these videos is to be able to articulate principles and concepts that are really important for the betterment of my life and the lives of everyone around me, and those are lives that I affect directly or indirectly through something called the butterfly effect. We're all a ripple in the pond, a drop in the ocean, and one drop raises the sea. So your little impact goes farther than you could ever comprehend. And that goes into something called legacy. And I think I'll do another video on legacy because I think that's an interesting concept I'd like to talk about more. But today, the one objective, I think, of what I'd like to talk about is to treat people better. That can also include treating yourself better. There's a healthy balance of self-love, but there's also the balance on the other side of loving yourself, of realizing that there are things about yourself that don't deserve love. And don't read into that too far. It's not like you should be hating something about yourself, but you should also look at that thing that's been nagging you for a while and decide that you're not going to accept that. And one of my weaknesses is being a negative person and being on guard around people, and that ties into trauma that I've been through, and that affects how you look towards the world. And trauma is an important concept to understand here, because when you run into someone that rubs you the wrong way, sometimes it doesn't make sense why the way they're reacting to a certain situation. And being a logical person, you might look at how they're reacting to something you said or did, or something that didn't even involve you, and logically you don't understand it. You said that's just the wrong reaction. It doesn't make sense. Why would they even go that way? But if you look at that person as a soul like your own, and you understand that maybe they've been through some trauma that that affects how their brain reacts to things. We're very old evolutionary beings, or adaptive beings, however you want to look at that for your own philosophical and spiritual beliefs. But without doubt, we're adaptive beings, and our ancestors were beasts and monsters and survivors. So we have a lizard brain that's very old and very deeply rooted in our blood, that sees a problem and initiates biological responses to protect you from that problem, which is why a lot of people can be so hardwired for the negative outcomes and possibilities, including myself. It's a weakness, but you also have to understand that it is a biological adaptation or evolution of your brain to protect yourself. So it's a strength. You can't look at things that you believe are weaknesses and completely call them bad and weaknesses. The things you've gone through, like that tree in my last video, it went through some heavy duty trauma, but because of that, you're going to have a much harder time knocking that tree down. Sometimes it's not always the case. Sometimes you're weakened and the next blow finishes you for good. But you got to go out fighting. teeth bared, yelling defiance until the end. That's a quote from a book, The Wheel of Time. I love that quote. I will run into the darkness, teeth bared, yelling defiance until the end. I just think that's badass. I love that. But you need to really observe how your body is reacting to things and understand the root cause. And I kind of started understanding this a little bit more when I took an IQ test quite a long time ago. And when I would run into a problem, my brain's reaction was to turn off, to not start solving the problem. It very quickly assessed the situation and realized that I wasn't capable of overcoming that in a very quick way. And you can't solve all the problems quickly in your life. But because of certain things in my past that have wired me certain ways, if I can't quickly overcome it, I go on the defense and I start looking for the thing to attack me, I should say. And you can't always do that. You need to think, okay, is this something that can actually attack me? Or am I just going into my turtle shell? And I think these kind of concepts impact everything in your life, even including intelligence, because that's something I thought about a lot. And I don't really believe in dumb or smart people to the degree that a lot of the ideas behind IQ and intelligence are constructed. And that's a real rabbit hole you can fall into. Because I've seen people that initially my first gut response is, oh, this person is not intelligent. And then if you listen to them long enough, they will come into an issue that most people would overcomplicate and retreat from or disregard or be ignorant of it consciously. And these people will simplify it and be able to articulate it. And some of these concepts, I've heard these people that I initially brushed off as not being in the high statistical realms of intelligence, we'll be having a conversation of a complicated interpersonal relationship or something like that, and they will just in one sentence wrap everything up. And you can't disregard simplicity. It takes a lot of complex brain work to take a complex issue and simplify it. That's kind of the definition of intelligence. Like my dad, for example, he's a programmer, and I've talked to him about this before, and he said, yeah, that's my job. I take a complicated issue that needs to be accomplished using ones and zeros, the basics of how a computer works, and those ones and zeros turn into a million different on and off switches that accomplish a million different things, and he needs to accomplish just one, which balloons out into a million other things that need to be accomplished, that need to be simplified. And so you can't disregard simplicity. But going back to the purpose of what I'm trying to say is, you have to treat people well. And my dad also, when I was talking about the similar thing about my own reactions to certain people and how they can kind of just burn me out if I'm around certain attitudes too long, he got to a point where he said, and his tone of voice was kind of striking, he says, you have to treat people well because they matter. And I don't think he said the first thing, but what he did, but the last part he said much differently. He said they matter. And even the person you look at and you think, if that person wasn't here, we'd be fine. that is a very dangerous way to think, because you can't just subtract matter from Earth. There's going to be an impact. Mass is neither created nor destroyed. It can change, though, and people change. Sometimes it's pretending to change, but they can change. With that said, there's a person I worked with, and I was in the position of training this person. I was running a bunch of CNC machines, which are machines that work on ones and zeros. CNC is computer numerical controlled. It's an on and off switch that turns into a bunch of different systems that you have to manage to create your desired outcome. And this person was probably 30% older than me. I don't know his exact age, but he was older than me, and I was in my early 20s. And he had come from owning his own business and gone through some trauma. I don't remember all the details, and they weren't all my business to know. But it fell apart, and here he was learning a fairly complex trade from someone fairly younger than him, and we butted heads because he had come from being the alpha in his domain, in his matrix, and he was thrust out of his matrix, and now he's got to learn all these things, and there's this kid who has to show him this. And my phone stopped recording because a little thing came up. I wanted to connect to some Wi-Fi and just turn my video off, so that was a little rude. iPhone. Hopefully I can blend these two videos together. But this guy had to train. We were butting heads, and I did not treat him very well, and I do regret that. And I talked a few times about the situation with the owner of the company, which was this fantastic guy that I learned a lot from. And at one point he said, not in a negative context, but he said he reminds him of a hurt dog. And the more I thought about that, the more concepts I kind of brought from that. And when you have a hurt dog, they're distrusting of everything. They are timid, but also potentially very violent. And this guy was potentially very violent. It could have gone bad if things had escalated more in certain situations that I had influence over and responsibility for the outcome of some of these situations. And I didn't perform very well, unfortunately. But when you have a hurt dog, it takes a long time and consistent energy in the right direction to create that outcome that you want. But once that dog trusts you, you have an ally who is battle-hardened, capable of serious aggression, but he's on your side. So when the storm comes, or the home intruder comes, or whatever, you've got an ally that's on your side. But when things are going well, and you're trying to catch that animal to put some food on your table, you've got that same aggression put to use to the right direction. And that's why you can't look at these traumatic influenced tendencies of your behavior as weaknesses, because they are your strengths. Doesn't mean you should neglect your weaknesses, but you need to recognize that you have these strengths, this foundation to build upon. Your roots in the ground are going a certain direction. You need to use that for your stability, but you also need to reach out into the other directions to create your strengths, or to expand your strengths even more, the roots of the tree. And another concept the owner of this company explained to me is a two-legged chair doesn't stand up too well. You'll have to lean against a wall, then you have a gravity stand. But that's not a very stable foundation. If you have at least three legs, now you've got a tripod, you're much more solid. Then you add a fourth, you're very solid. You start expanding from there, and good luck knocking that thing over. So, for example, my weaknesses that are also my foundational strengths, you could say, go back to when I was 3 years old. I was being babysat and someone kind of roughed me up, and it's weird because you don't remember things from 3 years when you're 3 years old, but when you're 3 years old, you're Plato, you're complete, you're in a theta brainwave state where you're kind of a robot. You're just downloading information, and then when you thrust that trauma into your downloading sequence, it affects very seriously the wiring of your brain in relation to people around you. And from that, I didn't really start talking till I was 8. And even when I did start talking at 8, it was rarely and when I needed to. So I'm 27 now. I've got 27 years of experience of watching people and learning from them. But I've only really got 19 years experience with speaking. And I had some speech disabilities, not really impediments, not really disabilities, things I had to work through. I had a lisp, a stutter, still kind of have a stutter every now and then. So one of the weaknesses I'm working on is being articulate, which helps me also take ideas in my head and put them out there so that I can hear my own nonsense and pick it apart and say, that makes no sense. I think that could be improved. And that's something I kind of recently learned from Jordan Peterson, who's a scientist with 30 years experience in clinical psychology. He's an incredible guy you should listen to. He will write things down because being able to articulate and writing concepts really flushes out nonsense. He doesn't read from notes, but he does write notes to articulate concepts before he speaks them, because he's very serious and very conscious of the language he uses, because he recognizes that words are very powerful and you have to be very careful with them and understand exactly what you mean, and whether what you're saying is nonsense that you don't really believe in and that you're just repeating like a parrot, or if it's something you've actually really conceptually flushed out and is rock solid. So I'm sure there's things I wanted to speak about. I actually tried recording this video 2 nights ago, and I wasn't too happy with how I was articulating certain things, so I wanted to redo it. And one of the things I talked about in that last video that wasn't so polished, there's a concept called lost opportunity cost that I learned from the owner of a machine shop, Brian, and he talked about it all the time. When you're looking to the negative, you're gonna protect yourself from that storm or the winter that you know is coming or you know may come. Sure, you'll be protected, but when the opportunity comes for you to really create a solid foundation, you're not so prepared for that opportunity. And when you create those allies, those people that you know you should be treating better, when you treat them good, you put yourself in a situation for when that opportunity comes, you're ready, and you don't lose that opportunity. And the concept of lost opportunity is cost is, what if I had been more prepared? What if I had done this? What if I did this, but also pushed a little harder? And I used that concept for a lot of things in life. And one of them was when I was selling cars. I did that for a short stint. There's one morning where I came in, and we have a sales meeting every morning, or had, and they kind of jokingly said, Thomas will do the meeting today. So I go up there, and I already was thinking about this, so I didn't have to think about what I was going to talk about. Right away, I was thinking, we always talk about our goals, what we want to, how many cars we want to sell, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm kind of thinking about recently is, how many cars should I have sold last month? And I wrote up on the board just kind of some numbers. It's like I sold 15 cars last month, one every other day, or 1.5 a day, roughly speaking. But I know there were people I was talking to that if I had done a little better, if I had worked a little harder, I know I talked to 15 other deals that I should have had. And that was my lost opportunity cost. And it was probably more than 15 deals. I probably could have pushed a crazy amount of cars if I had just been prepared and tenacious with what I was doing. Tenacity is a word I didn't know until I met this guy, Brian, the owner of the shop. I learned so much from this guy. Tenacity is your ability to keep pushing forward, more or less. It's kind of, you could just simplify it to that. It's your ability to keep pushing forward. And if you're polishing your professionalism and your abilities as you keep pushing forward, those lost opportunities start getting smaller and smaller, and you're absorbing a lot of profit, spiritually, physically, financially. Well, I have to go into work. I've overstayed my break. Thank you for sitting with me. I'd love to hear your ideas. If you would like, comment below the video. I haven't had any comments yet, but I'm sure you have thoughts. If you want, you can reach out to me privately if you'd like to express an idea that maybe you disagree with. I would just love to learn from you. You have your own outlook, and I'd love to hear it. Thank you for your time. Thanks for being here.